I have not made it a secret whatsoever that I absolutely loved the Backrooms movie, and I still think about it almost daily, just constantly thinking of hypotheticals of what if Clark actually, fixed himself, what if Captain Clark didn't kill him, what if Mary managed to escape through that little green room we saw her run by, if that even was like a no zone you could escape from. But one of the things I consistently think about the most is not a hypothetical. It's more of a question of what happened during the time skip. In case you somehow are not aware, during the movie, after about the halfway point, during the chase sequence, I guess you could call it, with Clark, we see him run into a wall with Kat. And while they are trying to figure out a way to, reconnect with each other, we see that something picks up the camera, and Kat, obviously extremely distressed, yells at Clark to look behind him, to which the camera cuts. And the literal first thing we see right after this cut is just Mary. From this point onwards, it's almost like the movie switches protagonist, and Mary becomes the protagonist and Clark becomes the antagonist. Though you could argue Clark was always the antagonist, but that's not the focus of the video. What I do want to focus on is what we do see of Clark once, Mary actually finds him in the back rooms again. When we see him, not only does he have different clothes, which is, expected, he is also extremely weird. His behavior is odd, way more weird than normal. And the first thing he does when he sees Mary is hide, almost as if he was scared or like trying to sneak up on her, which when we see what he does to her later makes total sense. But I do want to bring attention to the way he's talking, the way his demeanor has completely changed, the fact that he just looks completely deranged. And maybe it's just me, but when I first saw like all of Clark's actions and how crazy he looked during these final minutes of the movie, I for one thought that maybe he was in the back rooms for like at least half a year, because normal people don't go crazy so quickly. But I guess depending on what you see in the back rooms and depending on the type of person you are, in this case Clark being a pretty much a psychopath, especially near the end of the movie, it is kind of warranted. I do want to take a bigger look at that specifically though. How long was Clark really in the back rooms after everything that happened with Bob and Kat? Now at first, the first conclusion I came to was a few months, and the reason I came into this conclusion was mainly because of the bills, like all of the bills you see piled up outside of Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. And let me tell you, you do not get bills all that frequently. There is quite a lot of papers. Now, obviously, a lot of these could be newsletters, and realistically, this could be all just within a month. We don't really know if Clark is signed up to a bunch of newspapers or newsletters or whatever the hell it is. So it could just be that he's just signed up to a lot of things, and within a month he gets a bunch of these papers delivered. But the other detail I want to take a look at is Kat's head. Not exactly the head itself, but more the state it is in. Seeing how badly decomposed the head is could be a good detail or a nice piece of evidence that could tell us more or less the time frame that Clark was actually spending in the backrooms. So I looked this up, and Google says it takes about 3 to 4 weeks under normal morgue refrigeration. Now call me crazy, but I don't think a random ass fridge in the backrooms is gonna be able to output that much cold. Not only because, it's a normal fridge. I'm not trying to insinuate the backrooms is not able to accurately recreate things. This has been proven true. Lighting and Tile Survey is a whole episode specifically dedicated to showing that the backrooms, when it does recreate things, even if they are messed up in some ways, they do hold their, internal details, and they are actually well functioning. But as you can see very clearly in this image, Kat's head is not really all that decomposed. Yes, it's bloodied and probably beaten up a little bit, because at the end of the day, this is another mystery. We don't really know how she died. We don't know if Clark killed her. We don't know if she accidentally killed herself, maybe by falling down a long place, maybe breaking her neck. We don't know if Captain Clark killed her. At the end of the day, we don't really know what happened, so we can't insinuate exactly what led to her dying. We don't know if maybe right after that cut, Kat started running. We don't know if she died immediately after the cut, or maybe she actually escaped Clark, and maybe over the span of a week she actually tried surviving inside of the backrooms. Maybe she ended up meeting her demise again, either by accident or by maybe another creature, another still life. Who knows? The fact of the matter is, her head is not all that decomposed, which would tell you maybe it hasn't actually been that long since the cut, because like I mentioned, this fridge is 100% not capable of replicating morgue temperature and actually keeping a decomposed limb, or head for that matter, without decomposing for more than maybe a week and a half. So there is two hypotheticals here. Either there was actually a really big time skip, of maybe a few months, the bills being an indicator, or there is actually only like about a week, maybe week and a half of a time skip. This all completely depends on how much Kane actually looked into, the science of it. Because for all his genius, and believe me, Kane Parsons is a genius, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we also just don't look hard enough into some details we add into the movie. However, the more I think about this and the more I try to figure out how much time passed in the time skip, I realize that it really doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, what would it reveal? The truth is, Clark, as we all know, was already fucked up before the Backrooms. Whether it was 2 weeks or 4 months, it doesn't really change what could have happened during that time skip all that much. So I think this isn't as important of a question as I first posited. What I do think is important, and what I do think a lot more people need to look at, is the director commentary for the movie that was released about a week ago or a few days ago. Because Kane actually does reveal quite a few interesting tidbits about not only what happened during the time skip, or at least what he thinks happened during the time skip, but also Clark's motivation for keeping Kat's head.
I would lean Clark's motivations with pertaining to Kat's head in the fridge are definitely not too malicious, and are likely more the result of him experimenting and being hopeful that, like from the stuff he's observed while spending time in here, that there's a good chance Kat will come back if she's just kept in a semi-intact
he believes in cryogenics.
State. Well, the Backrooms, he's observed things being brought back and being returned, and this place remembering things, and so there's a very real possibility, I think, that it could correct the physical damage that's been done, and not physically to the I don't think he knows exactly how it would work, but I think there's a optimism behind that choice.
Pay attention to that wording. I want you to really focus on the way he says there's a chance it would fix the damage that's been done to her. Not that he did to her, not that Clark did, not that Captain Clark did, just the damage that was done. Kane is very obviously using extremely vague language right here to maybe not give away. He does mention earlier on that the reason he wants to give us this information and wants to divulge Clark's motivation is because it's a thing that you wouldn't really be able to figure out while just watching the movie, and he's not sure if this would be revisited again, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, not ridiculous of him to think that. I think it's a ridiculous concept to think about right now, because with how successful this movie was, this 100% will be revisited, and I hope to God we are able to revisit the time skip and get an actual confirmation of the events that actually happened. However, another interesting aspect that Kane reveals by showing us what Clark's motivation was is the fact that it actually wasn't malevolent. Again, we see this glimpse of Clark that, again, despite the fact that he's a psychopath, despite the fact that he hurts everybody, he still in some way is trying not to be bad. He's trying to see if somehow keeping her head refrigerated in some type of way will make it so that the Backrooms can bring her back. He definitely feels guilty about it. He doesn't like the fact that Bobby and Kat died, which again leads me into this idea that maybe Clark himself didn't kill Kat and that it was Captain Clark. It's one of those things that, again, makes you wish we had official confirmation or some sort of maybe short film about this specific time period. What the hell happened? If Clark is so remorseful about this, what happened? How did she die? He does mention that he tried to help her when Mary asks him if that head is from one of his employees. He's like, oh, well, I tried to help her. What happened? Like, that again fuels my theory of it being that Kat died to some other entity, to some other thing. Maybe to Captain Clark himself. Maybe Captain Clark was just immediately hostile towards her, and while Clark was trying to help her and help her survive, Captain Clark just did not give a fuck and munched on her. Maybe just eating most of her and leaving the hand we do see near the stop sign and the head. Overall, I think Kat's head and subsequent death, or backwards, however you want to say, is definitely one of the most appealing and one of the most interesting aspects of this whole time skip potential project we could get. I would absolutely love to see this being delved more into, but it's not the only aspect. The other thing we do have to consider, and we basically have to theorize on when it comes to this specific time period, is Clark's and Captain Clark's relationship. As we can see in the picture that Phil shows us from Async, they were together. And not just, you know, together as in living near the same spaces, you know, coexisting. They were like actually going to places together. They are literally walking with each other here. This is something that thankfully in the director's commentary, Kane actually speaks on.
And the furniture crabs. There's a little table that scurries around like a very fast crab. Sort of like a head crab.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, no, Clark, specifically Pirate Clark, hates it. And I like to think during this period of time they go on little adventures together. Like while Mary's away and we're away from Clark, there's this whole little whimsical sitcom going on between the two of them. Just going on little mysteries and whatnot, and just dealing with little antics in this place.
There's two main things to take note of when it comes to this little commentary piece. First off, furniture crabs. We got a confirmed new like entity, I guess you could call it, from the Backrooms. From the way he describes it, it seems to me like just a bunch of tables, and you, as you know, tables have 4 legs, or maybe 3 if you're a fucking psychopath. I don't know, but just a table that moves essentially. And not just that, there's also the fact that according to him, Pirate Clark hates them. As to why, I'm not really sure. He doesn't divulge a lot, but that says a lot. First off, it confirms that during that time, maybe even before Clark actually came into the Backrooms or wherever, Pirate Clark encountered these little furniture crabs, and he grew or interacted with them enough to the point where it hates them. And second, it confirms that Pirate Clark is actually like a complex enough being to have feelings such as anger and hate. That is extremely interesting, and it, in my opinion, deconfirms a lot of the theories that, oh, Pirate Clark ate Clark because he's just an animal. You know, they're just kind of mindless, they're brainless, they just do things randomly. To me, this deconfirms those theories by confirming that the still lives, or at least still life that is to the level of Pirate Clark, is capable of higher thoughts and higher function. Are they intellectuals? I doubt it a lot. But again, it's very interesting to see. Now, just in case you doubt that this would be canon or confirmed, because right after talking about the furniture crabs, he goes to talk about Pirate Clark and Clark being on whimsical adventures, which obviously doesn't seem like it would fit into the world. I want you to pay attention to two things. First off, this is not the first time Kane has confirmed something like this before. Back when Found Footage 3 came out and we got our first look at a still life, we had no idea what it was. And when somebody asked Kane, he straight up just said, "Oh, that's a still life." No further explanation. He is not a stranger to confirming things out of the blue just because he kind of feels like it. And secondly, I want you to pay attention to the language he uses when he actually starts to talk about the second thing. When he talks about the crab, he just sort of affirms it as if it's a fact that he's known his whole life. It's just like, oh, the furniture crabs. And then he goes on to explain what it is. But when he actually talks about what he thinks it would be like, it almost is played off like a joke. You know, he says, "I like to think." Now, aside from that being a very weird comment, considering that, my brother in Christ, you are the fucking creator. What do you mean you'd like to think? These are your characters. You don't like to think. You either make it canon or you don't make it. Again, it supports the idea that this is just a joke. He's just saying a joke or something offhandedly that, oh, I would like to think they go on whimsical, funny adventures. They probably did not. But that actually does beg into question, what did they actually do during this time? My guess is that the joke that Kane makes is actually not too far off. While obviously they didn't go on funny little adventures where they explored the pool rooms and took a dip, I think they actually did explore together some of the back rooms. First off, because of the picture, it straight up confirms that they did walk to somewhere together, and who's to say they didn't do that multiple times? And secondly, there's the idea of them coexisting. Now, I do not think Clark would be very fond of Pirate Clark, whether that is because he hates himself, which I doubt, he is extremely narcissistic, or because, you know, Pirate Clark might have killed Cat, and maybe from that moment on, he knows Pirate Clark is an extension of himself, but in a way he feels uneasy around him. He doesn't like him all that much, and that is also why when Pirate Clark finally comes into the living room of what is presumably Clark's house inside of the Backrooms, Clark's first reaction is, "You're not supposed to be here." Like, he says something along those lines. He's like, "You don't come in here, you don't do that." It's almost like they have this unspoken rule of like, yo, don't come close to me, do not like look at me. It's kind of like a roommate you don't like very much, but at the same time, Clark is such a curious person, especially when it comes to the Backrooms. He is so fascinated by it, by wanting to understand it and wanting to know everything about it, that when you are presented with this opportunity of this life form, literally this creature you've never seen before, that seemingly is part of the thing you're trying to explore, wouldn't you be so curious as to follow it, as to see what it does? And not only that, I guarantee you at some point during this period of them traveling the Backrooms together, something happened with furniture crabs. In the mural that Clark painted, there is one of the phrases that says, "Tables don't bleed blood." So in what situation would Clark have to stab or maybe open up a table to see that maybe it actually did bleed blood or something similar to it for him to paint that in the mural? Now, there could be a few situations. It could have literally just been him experimenting with random stuff, but in my opinion, with everything that's been set up so far, I think during one of those expeditions, I guess you could call it, they found a furniture crab. Maybe Pirate Clark was chasing one of them because he hates them for some reason, and because Pirate Clark is not very fast and not very able to catch nimble things. We don't really know how fast these things would be, but I'm assuming he wouldn't be able to. Clark had to help him and maybe kill one of these furniture crabs in some way, maybe befriending Pirate Clark more than before or making him happy. I don't know. Again, there is so much potential with this. We don't know how long it was, but I surmise it's long enough to maybe make a short film out of it. There has to be content here that could be expanded on. There has to be interesting ideas that could be shown to us. So, dude, please, Kane, if somehow, some way you find this, bro, talk to A24. Make a short film out of this, add it to the YouTube series, maybe make it a whole series where Async is like looking at Clark and Pirate Clark through cameras. Make it a whole found footage segment, but it's not found footage, it's just like security cams of the hijinks and the stuff they got up to. That would be so cool. But yeah, I've been ranting for way too long. I don't really got much on this because, again, we don't have a lot of evidence or information about what could have possibly happened. And I'm trying to speculate with the things I have on hand at the moment. But I just legitimately do not have enough to actually make a concrete, solid theory. The little ramblings and little details you can get here and there from this video are about all I have. So if you watch this long-ass video, thank you a lot. I love every single one of you that stops by, takes the time to consume any of my content. I appreciate it a lot. I hope all of you have a great day, morning, night, whatever it is. And yeah, God bless you.